But our top story right now is President Trump's threats of this trade war, which he then quickly backed off of because it has real-world consequences for you, for people in this country, for people in other countries, even though it is also, as we begin the week, a kind of sputtering opening failure of his efforts. The same Americans who were very concerned about prices and inflation back in November, that was a key issue we were told by voters, could be impacted by what we can only see so far as Donald Trump's sort of shaky or inconsistent tariff threats. And this is the very start of his tenure. This is his January, February priority based on a November victory. He's in office less than a month, and now we can report, as you may have heard, but we're going to get into the details, Trump is blinking today after threatening what could have been this trade war over the weekend. Now, there are many countries that have tried various tariff efforts for many decades. So we actually know a bit about what you see on your screen, how supply chains and products and grocery prices and shipping, how all of this is affected. Many countries have found that, again, I'm going to generalize, but a sudden sort of one-way effort to engineer tariffs don't tend to benefit the country starting that trade war. And as for the inflation that I mentioned, economists and many impacted businesses estimate that ineffective tariffs, sort of just throwing them out there, will increase inflation, and they become essentially a new tax. So today, that's the context for Donald Trump now backing off what was threatened as 25% tariffs, which is a big, steep hike, on the neighboring countries of Canada and Mexico. He is basically blinking. This story matters even if he backs down. He's also claiming that he got some minor adjustments, but not really at the economic tariff level. That's what he says he's getting in return for delaying the thing he threatened that he's not doing. Donald Trump has pulled his own tariffs and his own tariff schedule. He had vowed these to begin as soon as midnight. Now he's delaying them, he says, for 30 days, but that could be longer given what we've just lived through.
Well, it was obviously going to run into a lot of problems. I mean, first thing to say, I'm not a lawyer, but the tariffs look illegal to me. I mean, Trump invoked an emergency economic powers, and we don't have an economic emergency. We have low unemployment and low inflation. Right. What's this about? And it's also supposed to be used for economic ends, and they sort of settled on drugs as the justification, which clearly was bogus, right? And the drugs, fentanyl here is the weapons of mass destruction of the trade war, and it's a fake argument. And then why do it? Trump has always. This is a personal Trump fixation. This is one of these things where there isn't really a strong interest group. There isn't really a meaningful economic argument. The arguments are crazy. This is just something that Trump, you can find tapes of Trump going back to 1988 saying we should have 25% tariffs. Somehow or other, he made up his mind that he was smarter than anybody else on international trade policy, and this was his moment to do it. And he folded almost instantly when Canada and Mexico revealed that they are actually independent countries with a will of their own.
Yeah, you say he folded instantly because of the reaction to the tariffs. What is that reaction? Why were they so confident? In a different world, in the Trump cosplay fantasy land, he would announce these things. You make a very fair point that there's a lot of questions about the underlying authority. But he would announce something, and then folks would run away and cower. That's the story he sold to his voters, for sure. Yeah. Explain to us how the actual mechanism of the threatened tariff and what they could do in return left them in such a strong position against President Trump.
Well, the main thing to understand is that there is no such thing as a U.S. manufacturing sector. We've had NAFTA, we've had a free trade area for almost 30 years now, and we have deeply integrated manufacturing. If you ask, where was a car, if you buy an American car, where was the car actually made? And the answer is, well, that's complicated. Pieces of it were made in all three countries. Components may have crossed the border 7 or 8 times, which means that even just the U.S. imposing tariffs is imposing a lot of costs on our own industry. And if Canada and Mexico respond in kind, then they're further raising the costs. It hurts them, but it also hurts us. We're kind of in a situation where we're all in a position to inflict a lot of damage because this is, not our we've become mutually dependent, and unlike U.S. politicians who run and hide under the table when Trump says a nasty word, Mexican and Canadian politicians have to answer to their voters, and they're real countries with real pride and real want to stand up. What was interesting was this was the classic: a bully runs away at the first sign of a real confrontation.
All really fair. You look at the election that I mentioned, and I think you and I and others could debate for hours which thing really drove what in the election. And I think there's a tendency, I won't speak for you, you're a Nobel-winning economist, so you obviously use real metrics, Professor. But over here in politics and newsland, people seize on one thing, they tend to be over-explaining or over-determining. So with all that caveat said, Donald Trump and people around him claim that Biden didn't handle the economy well enough, and that they benefited from concern about prices and inflation. I want to play a little bit of that because, again, from what you're teaching us tonight, it sounds like the exact opposite thing you would do if you wanted to help people with grocery prices. Take a look at Donald Trump.
And I went on groceries. It's a very simple word, groceries. Like almost, who uses the word? I started using the word, the groceries.
A vote for Trump means your groceries will be cheaper.
It'll also bring your grocery bill way down. I have more complaints on groceries.
Groceries, that word groceries, Professor. What does his plan, which he claims would still kick in a month potentially, would it raise, leave the same, or lower grocery prices here in America?
If take a look at the labels on the fruit and vegetables in your supermarket, an awful lot of them are coming from Mexico. Some are coming from Canada. You put a tax on what is basically a sales tax on groceries from our neighboring countries. You think they're going to get cheaper? I mean, that's crazy. And it never made any sense at all. And he's never had any hint of a plan to bring grocery prices down. Basically, he sort of admitted that you can't, that there's really no way to do that. And why would you, and so to the extent that at least voters were unhappy about grocery prices, and we can go on and on about, didn't wage growth at least match that, but never mind. The point is that this is a plan to definitely worsen the one thing that voters most consistently complained about.
So do you expect any actual binding short, medium, or long-term tariffs to be instituted by President Trump, or what we're witnessing today, this blinking, is sort of going to become the norm for him?
I have no idea. I mean, we're trying to understand a particular man's mind, and not one of the minds I particularly want to understand that well. But he's on the one hand, he's going to be getting a lot of taunts about how you back down, and that might make him decide to go for it a month from now. Or he may have learned his lesson that he can't actually bully other countries that easily. Could go either way. What I think is important to understand is that this is not a case of no harm, no foul. The mere fact that we came within an inch of having a massive trade war, which was definitely illegal. We have a binding agreement on trade with Canada and Mexico. It's not something where the president of the United States can say, well, I don't feel like honoring that agreement. Or if he does, he's basically saying that the United States is not a trustworthy partner. An agreement with the United States is not worth the paper it's printed on. So, and this is going to have a long-term effect on our credibility. Businesses are going to plan for the possibility of future tariffs, even if they didn't happen this month. So that's going to raise costs. This is all and then, I have to say, although I'm really glad that he backed down, that itself doesn't help our credibility either. I mean, the United States is in a measurably weaker position on the world stage than it was a week ago.
Yeah, well, and you put it starkly, which is why we wanted to, it's a big story, we wanted to get some understanding of it. And you're our economic expert. Before I let you go, you left after a long time with the New York Times. We noted that on air. You write your newsletter now, and you've sort of written in there for those who are interested in the circumstances of your departure. Do you feel that the New York Times and other media, quite frankly, are taking up the right approach and being sort of without fear or favor able to cover this administration, which has threatened journalists, which is, as we've covered, going after the rule of law in various ways. Is there any thoughts you want to share about that at your former employer, The Times, or how the journalistic community should approach this right now?
I mean, the conventional news media are invaluable. So, I depend upon the reporting from my old employer. I depend upon the reporting from other news organizations. But there's definitely sane washing that goes on. Definitely an unwillingness to just flatly report and we have crazy stuff that was true during the campaigns, even more so now. And it really, if all you do is read the papers, that you don't get all of that. So this is why, I'm happy to be now free to, have a fairly substantial subscription base already and to be able to talk about this stuff without trying to sound moderate and sensible, because these are not moderate and sensible times.
And to be clear, I don't want to put any words in your mouth as a journalist. You mentioned sane washing, or the sort of approach of giving excessive or not entirely factual credence to something for empirical or rhetorical reasons. Are you concerned that that's happening in print outlets? Are you concerned that's happening at the New York Times?
Oh, I think yes. I mean, I'm sorry. I don't want to trash my employer. Do not drop your subscription to the New York Times. That's an essential news source. But you definitely, mostly it takes the form of a sort of flattening, that everything becomes, you don't get the full sense. I mean, you just don't. I mean, if you read about Elon Musk's attack on USAID, the critical aid agency, did you read that he called it evil, that he said all of the staff are left-wing Marxists who hate America? I think you probably may not have seen that, or if it was downplayed, it was in paragraph 19. And that's what I don't think the media are adequately conveying about what's happening now.
Now, I'm going to just be straight with you about all this. I mean, in the face of all of this and much more that's happened the last 2 weeks, there's not always been the type of clear, consistent, and united response from leading Democrats that I believe, and you probably believe, the moment requires. Yes, there have been some powerful voices out there in the confirmation hearings especially, but overall, it's taken far too long, in my view, for elected officials to respond boldly. And when they do respond, those responses aren't often specific enough or bold enough. And it just hasn't been super clear all the time to me, or to probably all of you, what they are actually doing to push back on this hostile takeover. And that's a problem. But the good news is we have started to see some signs of life. Today, Democratic Senator Brian Schatz said he would place a blanket hold on all of Trump's State Department nominees until his administration's attack on USAID ends. House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries announced that Democrats will introduce legislation to, quote, prevent unlawful access to that federal payment system that I just mentioned. Congressman Jerry Connolly, the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, is asking Chairman James Comer to invite Elon Musk to the committee's hearing on right-sizing government this Wednesday. And congressional Democrats held a fiery press conference today outside of the USAID building right here in Washington, D.C.
We are going to fight in every way we can. In the courts, in public opinion, with the bully pulpit, in the halls of Congress, and here at AID itself.
This is all a smokescreen, a shell game, in order to turn this government over to a handful of unelected billionaires and corporate interests, and we are not going to let them do that.
Just like Elon Musk did not create USAID, he doesn't have the power to destroy it. And who's going to stop him? We are. We're going to stop him.
Okay, that's the fire. That's the life I'm talking about. Now, after that press conference, members even tried to get inside the shuttered USAID building. And I'm going to talk to one of those members, Senator Chris Van Hollen, in just a few minutes. So we're seeing some signs of life. There needs to be more, but they're trying. That's some encouraging news, some much needed encouraging news. And we're seeing this not just among elected officials or politicians, but among unelected people, people who have spent their careers serving the public and have now found themselves caught in the crosshairs of this hostile takeover, trying to stand up for what's right. At USAID, yes, Elon Musk pushed the director of security and his deputy out, but not before they tried to stop Musk people from gaining access to restricted spaces at the agency. At the Treasury Department, a career civil servant was pushed out because he refused to give Musk's team access to that federal payment system that they eventually bullied their way into. And at the FBI, acting FBI Director Brian Driscoll refused a Justice Department order that he assist in the firing of agents involved in January 6 cases, reportedly pushing back so forcefully that some FBI officials feared that he would be dismissed. One FBI agent summarized what happened like this. Bottom line, DOJ came over and wanted to fire a bunch of J6 agents. Driscoll is an absolute stud, held his ground, and told White House proxy DOJ to F off. It's pretty bold. And look, when you're fighting against the President of the United States and his billionaire sidekick with vengeance, you are fighting an uphill battle. Let's be real. But they're still fighting. They're still standing up for what's right, even if it means putting their own jobs at jeopardy. And that is important. Because at the end of the day, what these past weeks have made clear is that this takeover is going to proceed unchecked unless there are efforts to check it. In other words, there's no cavalry coming. You are the cavalry, elected officials, governors, civil servants, all of you sitting at home. You are the cavalry to stop this. And we will be here, right here, to talk about what's happening. Where bolder action and voices are needed, we will call that out. We will keep our eyes open, we won't look away, and we will continue to shine a light on the people standing up for what is right. Joining me now is one of those people, Jake Strubing. He had been an assistant U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia since 2023 before he was fired on Friday because of his work on January 6 cases. And this is his first time speaking out since his firing. It's great to see you. Thank you for being here with me.
Thank you for having me, Jen.
I wanted to just start by asking you, it has probably been a crazy last couple of days. What have the last few days been like for you?
Well, they've been a whirlwind. As you mentioned, I have been with the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. since September 2023. I had been working on January 6 cases. I've prosecuted a number of defendants for their role at the riot at the United States Capitol on that day. When the pardon came down on January 20th, a number of us, including myself, were reassigned to a division within the office to prosecute local violent crimes. And so the news on Friday came as quite a bit of a surprise, although we were also kind of expecting it. We've been walking on eggshells for the last several weeks.
I think it's such an important point what you were reassigned to do. So when you were fired on Friday, you were working to prosecute crimes in our nation's capital. Tell me more about your work and what you were doing.
Sure. So I had been prosecuting January 6 cases for the last 2 years, last year and a half to be exact. I had been reassigned to prosecute local crimes, crimes here in the District of Columbia. And I think those firings, approximately 12 prosecutors, including myself, who were fired, we were ready to, even despite all of the chaos going on in the federal government right now, we were ready to keep our heads down and do that work, prosecute local crimes. And what has happened, I think, over the last few days and what happened on Friday with the firings is that it damages public safety and, quite frankly, makes the D.C. community less safe.
This is the firing on Friday, which I've called a massive purge of the FBI, also of a range of prosecutors like yourself, a number of them, as you just noted. As you look, you've been working for the system for a couple of years. As you look at what this is doing to the Department of Justice and our law enforcement across the country, cities like Washington, D.C., what concerns you the most?
Well, I have a number of concerns. And I think, again, part of what's going on, purging DOJ, purging the FBI, part of that is the goal of that is to create chaos and hysteria. But if we take a step back and try and look objectively at this, as I'm trying to do as a prosecutor, as an attorney, looking at the evidence, we have a president who has pardoned hundreds of defendants on January 6 who violently assaulted officers. Some of those officers were, assaulted within inches of their life. We now have an interim U.S. attorney in the District of Columbia who is firing prosecutors, including myself. And now we know that hundreds, if not thousands, of FBI agents are on the chopping block. I've worked with a number of those FBI agents, and they're not just January 6 agents. They work on terrorism cases, they work on violent crimes, they work on cyber crimes, they work even on child exploitation matters. So we're talking about that, all of that. It's quite frankly a threat to national security, what we're seeing right now.
When you say chaos, tell me more about what you think could happen here, because it could be there's a list that's being asked for. It could be some reports suggest 3/4 of FBI agents. What is the concern you have? What could that chaos prompt?
It's a very good question. I know a lot of the FBI agents that I've worked with are quite frankly stressed at the moment that they may be fired. They're not going to be able to work cases, meritorious cases that are, being investigated right now. And as I mentioned, that's going to make us less safe. That's going to make American citizens less safe.
One of the questions I've had, and it's only been a couple of days, is what can happen now, right? And what legal steps could you and others who have been fired take? There was today, attorneys representing some of the fired prosecutors sent a letter to the acting deputy attorney general warning that the terminations may violate due process rights. Are you part of that group? Do you plan to sue as well?
So I don't want to comment on any potential litigation or pending litigation that may come about from all this. I will say just personally, and I don't speak on behalf of any of my colleagues or former colleagues, just myself, but I am looking at all the options that are on the table.
Including possibly suing yourself, but we're not going to comment on it further, I understand. Let me ask you just about the how you viewed this and watched this. You mentioned that Donald Trump pardoned 1,500, many of them violent offenders, insurrectionists, on his first day in office. He's at the same time allowed for, overseen the firing of so many people who prosecuted them. This is work that you and so many others have worked on tirelessly for months. What has that been like to watch?
It's heartbreaking, quite frankly. We've devoted our lives to this, the last few years of our lives, and to see it all kind of come crashing down has been very difficult, but we have to remain vigilant, even more so than now that I really think there is, with all these violent criminals who have been pardoned, with FBI agents who may be let go, with fewer prosecutors on the line, I think we have to be more vigilant than ever, given the threat.
But we begin tonight with a full-on crisis in our democracy, as federal workers are literally locked out of their offices while operatives working for a private citizen essentially take over our government. Their tactics include turning off our federal websites, deleting government-funded research that you, the taxpayer, paid for to impose speech codes, bullying news organizations by demanding interview transcripts, implementing an FBI purge, locking federal workers out of their computers, and even turning them away at their offices while giving themselves, without congressional or any other authorization, full access to the personal data of tens of millions of Americans, including Social Security recipients, FBI agents and officials, military and government contractors, and every single employee of the federal government. All of that data in private hands that you did not authorize, even if you voted for Donald Trump. This as Trump installs unqualified minions at the heads of every federal agency, knowing that they wouldn't stop this even if they knew how. At least when he's not threatening multiple trade wars or vowing to launch a new age of American imperialism by colonizing the indigenous people of Greenland and the Panama Canal, all while congressional Democrats issue strongly worded letters, plus holding a press conference today, and congressional Republicans sit back and let the federal government they work for collapse all around them, while they occasionally beg Trump for tariff mercy for their states. If this were happening in any other country right now, I promise you, I'd be on the air calling it a coup. This was the scene today at the United States Agency for International Development, better known as USAID, where protests erupted after workers were ordered by email, if they could even access their emails, to not report to the office and to work from home instead, despite the so-called DOGE directives just a week ago that all workers must work from the office 5 days a week. A group of Senate and House Democrats were blocked from even entering the agency's headquarters in Washington, D.C. Here's one of the hundreds of USAID employees who lost access to their computer system overnight.
You just don't feel safe. I took my pride flags down. I took my decorations down. I took any books I felt that would be, remotely indicative of my position off my desk. And still, I guess the big thing is that Friday we heard that DOGE was in here, and then Saturday all the websites went down, and then I lost access to everything that I had on my computer. I've never felt so disempowered or disrespected as I have in the past 12 days in the walls of somewhere that I love so much.
USAID is by law an independent agency. It provides crucial aid overseas to fund education and to fight starvation and disease. But now, unelected billionaire Elon Musk, who is heading Trump's drive to shrink the federal government, is determined to shut it down. Today, Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed to reporters traveling with him in Central America that he is now the acting administrator of USAID.
I'm the acting director of USAID. I've delegated that authority to someone, but I stay in touch with him. And again, our goal was to go in and align our foreign aid to the national interest. But if you go to mission after mission and embassy after embassy around the world, you will often find that in many cases, USAID is involved in programs that run counter to what we're trying to do in our national strategy with that country or with that region.
Rubio did not name the someone who he has delegated his authority to. This is the work of unnamed members of DOGE, well, some unnamed, the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, which I cannot stress enough, does not exist, as it was never created by Congress, but which is barging into federal office after federal office anyway, demanding entry and access to the computers. When the DOGE people arrived at USAID on Friday, they forced their way in and gained that access, as they have already done and at other offices of the federal government, the Office of Personnel Management and the Treasury Department, where they gained access to our Social Security files and the contents of everything everyone working for the federal government put into their job applications and their applications for security clearances, their financial information, personal information, information about their families, and more. All of that private data is now in the hands of people that you didn't vote for and didn't give permission to have it. Effectively, Elon Musk, an unelected billionaire oligarch, now has access to the personal data of millions, really tens of millions of Americans, and the data of his competitors, his business competitors, giving his companies an unprecedented advantage in their existing and likely future lucrative government contracts while they develop and exploit AI technology. Is that what you voted for? The Office of Personnel Management has been completely taken over by Elon's cronies. Elon forced out the head of the Federal Aviation Administration and the highest-ranking career official at the Treasury Department, Derek Lebrick, who reportedly resigned after refusing to hand Musk's lackeys the keys to the government's entire payment system and the $6 trillion in payments that the system processes every year. And it's not just Elon. Some of these so-called DOGE officials, including people barely out of college who, and I cannot stress this enough, report to these private individuals, not to the American people. We know very little about them, but some appear to have connections to fellow white South African oligarch Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance's sole former employer. Over the past 2 weeks, which kind of feels like it's been 2 years, we have learned just how fragile our democracy is and how relatively easy it is for someone who's determined and really well-funded to steal and corrupt it. If you were going to write a playbook for how to steal a democracy in less than 20 days, it would sure look a lot like this. Let's bring in Vaughn Hilliard, White House correspondent for NBC News, for the latest. I want to start with this question of what authority Elon Musk actually has. The White House official said today that Elon Musk is serving in the Trump administration as a special government employee, neither a volunteer nor a full-time employee. Have you ever heard of a special government employee? And if you have, what is that?
It's supposed to give an individual 130 days to serve in the federal government. Exactly the extent to which an individual like Elon Musk, Joy, has security clearance and just how high of a security clearance level, that is an outstanding question that we have. But I'll refer folks to an executive order that President Trump signed on the night of his inauguration, January 20th, that gave him and the White House counsel's office the authority to grant the highest security clearance level to any individual who they so desired. Because if you go back to 8 years ago, in 2017, 2018, there was a great many dozens of individuals who Donald Trump wanted to give top security clearances to, but were held up through the FBI because of questions about their backgrounds. And that grew to the frustration. And that led to ultimately Donald Trump signing that executive order on night number one. And now what you're looking at is Elon Musk and several individuals who are working and associated with him who are effectively demanding access into highly sensitive personnel data and parts of, for example, USAID headquarters that are not normally accessible to just any government employee.
And I want to go into this because Wired has done actually a lot of really good reporting, and they actually named 6 people, one of whom I think is still in college. And these are people who don't work for the federal government. It's hard to believe they have security clearances of any kind. Elon Musk has essentially banned people from Twitter, literally blocked their accounts and deleted their accounts for renaming those people, right? For naming those, identifying those people. This was journalism that happened that apparently they're not allowed to do that, right? And those people work for him. It's not a crime to do journalism and name those people if those people are gaining access to USAID and other places. Can you talk about what else is in that Wired story? And I don't know if you had this reporting as well, but that Elon Musk is making decisions about what he wants to get rid of based on not research, but maybe what he's actually getting on Twitter, like content that he's getting?
Right. We know that Elon Musk takes a lot of what he knows based off of what is being talked about on his own platform, X. I was provided 3 of those names of those young individuals who are, to our understanding, over the age of 18, but recent high school grads, college grads, who effectively have been brought into the government under OPM by Elon Musk. And there were 3 particular individuals who I was provided the names of as having had access to USAID offices. And why is this important outside of just individuals who previously didn't have experience in the government coming in within 2 weeks of this new administration and having vast access to personnel files? Well, it's the consternation that is caused internally in the offices. With USAID, effectively, thousands of employees have either been fired, furloughed, or placed on administrative leave. And those that are still there, just in the last hours, I've been getting messages from several of them that have said that they have lost email access, they have lost internal network access, and effectively USAID has been crippled and brought to a halt. And in those hours since all of this developed, just this afternoon, as you were alluding to, Joy, Elon Musk was on X explicitly saying that there was a Twitter account that broke the law in his version of events for naming 6 of the individuals who are working for Doge. Of course, there is no law that has been broken for naming those individuals. He removed that account off of X himself, but the D.C. acting attorney, U.S. attorney just tonight, again, this is not somebody that is Senate confirmed, but somebody who was is a very close Trump ally who was placed in after inauguration to be the acting U.S. attorney here in D.C., actively said that they are looking at investigating and prosecuting individuals who are seeking to, quote, target or impede Doge employees' efforts. And so the extent to which we're looking at Elon Musk essentially having a stand-down order to not just USAID employees, but individuals from Treasury or every other agency to not impede his efforts, I don't think that you could seek or have a stronger statement made from that than a U.S. attorney saying, if you get in the way of Elon Musk or any individuals working for him, we are going to seek to ultimately prosecute you.
So there's a newspaper in Long Island, New York, that's called Newsday. Long Island, just so you know, is massive. It's got millions of people. And in New York City, there's the New York Times, the New York Post, the New York Daily News, all based in the city, all these things we think of as New York papers. But out on Long Island, where there are millions of people, forever it's been New York Newsday. On Long Island, New York Newsday is a big paper, a big circulation. It is indisputably the paper of record, and it has been there forever. And I actually mean that literally. Local laws all over the country require the publication of public notices in the paper of record. So this is notices about upcoming public hearings, about proposed laws, real estate transactions, stuff like that. We don't really have classified ads the way we used to in newspapers, but there's still a bunch of fine print notices in major papers, and those are often public notices that are required by law in the local paper of record. And those public notices are a considerable source of income for local newspapers. So on Long Island, in Nassau County, Long Island, the county government there is headed up by an elected county executive. And in Nassau County, the county executive is a Trump guy. So much so that perhaps feeling a little jealous that Trump has his Oath Keepers and his Proud Boys, pro-Trump paramilitary militias, this county executive on Long Island has also formed his own semi-official paramilitary force of military and law enforcement veterans that he says he wants to be able to call up on his own orders to supplement official law enforcement. Yeah, if that puts a little shiver in your quiver, it's because you're paying attention. But that same very, very Trumpy county official in Long Island, New York, has now yanked all public notices from Newsday, from the paper of record in Long Island, and instead has started putting public notices instead in a right-wing New York City tabloid that's not even based in Long Island. Newsday is suing to get the public notices back, but we'll see. So that's one. Here's a second story. This is the second part of the same story. You might have also seen headlines recently about Trump's new FCC chair going after NPR and PBS. Now, I recognize you might have skipped past those headlines because they look familiar. Every time a Republican's in the White House, they always say they're going to go after NPR and PBS. And every time Americans rise up and say, you know, leave Big Bird alone and leave NPR alone, we freaking use it and we like it and go mess with something else. This time, though, did you see how exactly they're going after them? They've decided to go out a different way this time. They've opened an investigation into how NPR and PBS stations state on the air who their underwriters are. NPR and PBS are public broadcasting, so they don't accept ads per se, but they do accept sponsorships. And when you're watching something on PBS or listening to something on NPR, you will hear them tell you who their sponsors are. It's part of how NPR and PBS stations stay financially viable and sustainable and, honestly, locally grounded in their local communities because a lot of their underwriting is from local businesses. Right? I mean, if you've ever listened or watched public media, you know this. They do pledge drives to raise money from people who join as members. They also get local organizations and local businesses to sponsor their programs. So you get, like, you know, this hour of jazz and classical music brought to you by your local Ford dealer or whatever. But that is what they're going after them for this time. They're saying that their underwriting is somehow wrong. The way they state the names of their underwriters, that's illegal somehow. And this is a new approach. This is not the usual blunt force Republican attack of threatening to take away their federal funding. Federal funding only makes up a fraction of the budgets of NPR and PBS. No, they're doing it differently this time. They're actually going at they're going at the way these stations are sustainably and locally making money to keep their programs on the air, right? Because actually that funding is more important to NPR and PBS stations than federal funding is. And so, yeah, go at the thing that makes them their most money. Go at the thing that actually makes them viable. I mean, if these guys can stop the thing that makes these stations actually most of their money, that is a better way to cripple the high-quality, gold standard, independent U.S. journalism and programming of NPR and PBS. That's a better way to do it than just threatening to cut off the fraction of their funds that come technically from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and taxpayer money. So that's another. You might also have seen headlines about the move at the Defense Department to take away office space used at the Pentagon by correspondents from the New York Times and NBC News and other major news organizations. Now, it does not mean that these news outlets are banned from covering the Pentagon. It just means they can't cover the Pentagon as well as they do now. I mean, they'll be allowed to attend briefings and, you know, get emails or whatever, make phone calls. But they are no longer allowed to be based there at the Pentagon so they can be there all around the clock while decisions are being made and things are happening. They can't do that anymore. That office space has been there for Pentagon correspondents for decades. But in the Trump administration, they're pulling it from well-established, competent, independent news organizations that they don't like and that they would like to hurt. All of these stories are the same story. Right? This is not just your typical political thing where you've got somebody in the White House or somebody in politics complaining about press coverage. It's not even the typical thing with Trump calling the press the enemy of the people or whatever Stalinist thing he's onto now. This is what they call the Viktor Orban playbook for using the power of government to eliminate independent, credible, professional journalism. using the power of government to hurt journalism as much as possible, to weaken it as much as possible, to try to drive independent, capable professional media out of business and into ruin so that it goes away. And the only thing that's left is, for lack of a better term, state TV. In September, a few weeks before the election, the publisher of the New York Times wrote a long op-ed, and in a sort of gesture of solidarity, I think, he published it not in his own paper, but in the Washington Post. So it's the Times publisher publishing something in the Washington Post. And it was a really important piece. It was about what he thinks, at least, we should have been expecting if an authoritarian-minded Donald Trump returned to the White House and was determined to do to the press what he had been promising to do to the press through his first term. The warning basically was that Trump would probably try to do something to the press in this country along the same lines of what Viktor Orban did to the press in his country, in Hungary, when he destroyed the free press there as part of his takeover as a de facto dictator. It said this, quote, "He can't simply close newspapers or imprison journalists. Instead, he sets about undermining independent news organizations in subtler ways, using bureaucratic tools such as tax law, broadcast licensing, and government contracting. Meanwhile, he rewards news outlets that toe the party line, shoring them up with state advertising revenue and tax exemptions and other government subsidies. He helps friendly business people buy up other weakened news outlets at cut rates to turn them into government mouthpieces. Within a few years, only pockets of independence remain in the country's news media, freeing the leader from perhaps the most challenging obstacle to his increasingly authoritarian rule. Instead, the nightly news and broadsheet headlines unskeptically parrot his claims, often unmoored from the truth, flattering his accomplishments while demonizing and discrediting his critics. Quote, whoever controls a country's media, the leader's political director asserts, quote, controls the country's mindset, and through that, the country itself. This is the short version of how Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, effectively dismantled the news media in his country. This effort was a central pillar of Orban's broader project to remake his country as an illiberal democracy. A weakened press made it easier for him to keep secrets, to rewrite reality, to undermine political rivals, to act with impunity, and ultimately to consolidate unchecked power in ways that left the nation and its people worse off. It's a story that is being repeated in eroding democracies all around the world. And it is a story that is being aped right now by the second Donald Trump presidential term. And this is not yet being treated as one of the things the new Trump administration is doing, but they are doing it. And they are using both the federal government and allies outside government to do it. And if the model holds, I expect that what we're going to see is a big spike in defamation cases brought against various media companies, particularly now that so many companies are settling them and paying rather than fighting them. We will see a systematic litigation effort, I believe, to undo libel law in this country, the decades-old precedent called New York Times v. Sullivan. The goal of undoing that precedent will be to make it easier for truly ruinous lawsuits to be brought against news organizations, whether or not they're brought in good faith. If they can succeed in restructuring defamation and libel law in this country, which they are trying to do, it will result in a restructured legal environment where news organizations really can't win. And yeah, you can have the government come after them, but you can also have the president's allies in private life come after them in ways that are designed to financially weaken, cripple, and ultimately shut down or cause to be sold the oppositional independent media in this country. We have a free, oppositional, independent, aggressive, often annoying and pushy press in this country, which you may not always like. But it is how we learn what the government is doing. And it's the main reason why the government has to answer questions about what they're doing. Support for professional, independent, and even oppositional media has never been more important. We are seeing a wall-to-wall strategy start to gear up to try to blow up the press and effectively just have state TV from here on out. It is a concerted effort.
As usual, everything Donald Trump said to reporters in the Oval Office today was a lie, and there was no indication that any of them understood what he said about California water.
I opened up the water for California. It's a great thing. It's too bad they didn't do it themselves. I had to do it, and it was not easy. We did it a very rough way, and I didn't like to do it a rough way. We shouldn't have to do it a rough way.
In the stupidest water action in the history of California, last week, without warning, Donald Trump had the Army Corps of Engineers open up a federally controlled flow of water in Northern California that was completely unnecessary and unusable by anyone in Southern California, and possibly by anyone in California, because it almost created flooding in an excess of water beyond what anyone could use. And that water was completely incapable of reaching anywhere close to the Los Angeles area where Donald Trump is pretending his water could help with firefighting. One water scientist told the Los Angeles Times, "I don't know where this water is going, but this is the wrong time of year to be releasing water from these reservoirs. It's vitally important that we fill our reservoirs in the rainy season so water is available for farms and cities later in the summer." Everyone in California knows that, and no one in the Oval Office today knew that. Another water expert told the LA Times, "This is going to hurt farmers. This takes water out of their summer irrigation portfolio." 40,000 people in Los Angeles who have been burned out of their homes. Thousands more having to spend tens of thousands of dollars to have toxic ash removed from their surviving homes and property. People still mourning the dead, the people who lost their lives in the Los Angeles fires. And Donald Trump decides to insult them all by wasting water in Northern California and telling reporters and his followers today what a hero he is for stupidly wasting that water.